Claude Code is officially just for coders no more with the launch of Claude Cowork. One of the universally recognized truths among people in the AI industry is that the single worst named product is not somehow ChatGPT or GPT-5.2 Pro QXYZ or the totally out of left field Nano Banana Pro, but is in fact Claude Code. And the reason that Claude Code is such a bad name in some ways is that the code part of Claude Code in fact distracts from the full possibilities that the tool actually represents. Now, all it takes is a quick look at any especially non-technical person who has really dug into Claude Code to see why it's so much more powerful than it seems just from that name alone. Just a couple of days ago on Sunday, Nikhil Krishnan wrote, "I've spent the last 48 hours in Claude Code. As a non-technical person, it's basically unlocked three very big things for me. One, the ability to interact with APIs generally. Again, as a non-technical person, one of the big barriers to running the business has been touching APIs. For example, what you can do in Stripe in the non-developer portal versus through the APIs is night and day. Two, the ability to thread things together. Another issue has been threading several different projects we work with together to do cohesive tasks. Zapier gets you part of the way for triggers, but Claude Code lets me do way more complex things that touches multiple things simultaneously. Three, run something regularly. Being able to set a script and run it regularly with this level of ease is a game changer. In about an hour, I set up a daily email to myself that tells me the top 3 emails I need to respond to based on a priority scoring system we made together that pulls data from a few different places. I know I'm late to this and I'm probably doing things poorly, so be nice to me, but it's been really awesome to dive into this." Back in October, Lenny Rachitsky of Lenny's newsletter and Lenny's podcast wrote a piece called "Everyone Should Be Using Claude Code More," where he wrote, and I quote, "A few weeks ago, I finally started playing around with Claude Code and holy crap, we've all been sleeping on it. The key is to forget that it's Claude Code and instead think of it as Claude Local or Claude Agent. It's essentially a super intelligent AI running locally, able to do stuff directly on your computer. From organizing your files and folders to enhancing image quality, brainstorming domain names, summarizing customer calls, creating linear tickets, and as you'll see below, so much more." Now from there, he curated 50 of the most creative ways that non-technical people in his audience were using Claude Code. Point being that the non-technical folks who have spent the time to actually go figure out this technology have come away blown away and feeling like they are in a fundamentally different era of AI assistance where they really have a capable agent at their beck and call. But poor Nikhil, man. 691 likes, 111,000 views, only to have all that work just 2 days later be all for naught. He followed up on Monday, "Why did I learn this all the day before Cowork came out?" Yesterday, Anthropic announced Cowork. As they put it, Claude Code for the rest of your work. In the announcement post, they put it simply. When we released Claude Code, we expected developers to use it for coding. They did, and then quickly began using it for almost everything else. This prompted us to build Cowork, a simpler way for anyone, not just developers, to work with Claude in the very same way. And it's very clear from the testimony of Anthropic team members on Twitter/X that this was a very user behavior-inspired product evolution. Felix Riesberg from Anthropic wrote, "Claude Code doesn't just resonate with developers anymore. Non-technical people are using it to build things. Technical people are using it for non-technical work. The line is blurring. I'm by far not the first to think about this. Multiple teams at Anthropic have been working on agentic experiences for months. Claude not just as a chat partner, but as something that helps you do real work. Boris Cherny, who, editor's note, was the creator of Claude Code, nudged me. Can we take what we've built internally and ship an early, scoped-down version in a few days? So we took a small team, set an aggressive deadline, Monday sound good, and got to work." Boris himself also talked about the inspiration. He posted, "Since we launched Claude Code, we saw people using it for all sorts of non-coding work. Doing vacation research, building slide decks, cleaning up your email, canceling subscriptions, recovering wedding photos from a hard drive, monitoring plant growth, controlling your oven. These use cases are diverse and surprising. The reason is that the underlying Claude agent is the best agent and Opus 4.5 is the best model. Today then," Boris continues, "we're so excited to introduce Cowork, our first step towards making Claude Code work for all your non-coding work." So what are the features? With Cowork as opposed to just regular Claude, you're actually giving the system access to local files on your computer. Claude can then interact with those files, including reading, editing, or even creating new ones. This obviously creates a whole different set of use cases. Anyone who's ever dragged more than 10 documents into a chat conversation, only to be frustratingly told that there are limits, and yes, I know there are different workarounds for that, but being able to give access to everything in a folder that has potentially hundreds of files, think about my massive screenshots folders, for example, on this computer, and you start to see how different things could open up. As the Anthropic team points out, when you're using Cowork, Claude also completes the work that you give it with, as they put it, more agency than you'd see in a regular conversation. They write, "Once you've set it a task, Claude will make a plan and steadily complete it, while looping you in on what it's up to. From there, you can give Cowork access to connectors, which are Anthropic's ways of connecting to data sources like Google Drive. If you pair it with Claude and Chrome, Cowork can then also complete tasks that require browser access too. And of course, it's also powered by Anthropic's skill system. Now, the more agency that Cowork has really is part of the value proposition. They write, you don't need to keep manually providing context or converting Claude's outputs into the right format, nor do you have to wait for Claude to finish before offering further ideas or feedback. You can queue up tasks and let Claude work through them in parallel. It feels much less like a back and forth and more like leaving messages for a coworker. So let's talk about how people reacted to it and what they started to do with it. I will say first that there were a lot of, especially developers and technical folks, that were, to use a word, underwhelmed. Claude Cowork didn't really add anything new, but they were, of course, not the actual target. Olivia Moore for A16Z gets it when she writes, "Watershed moment for Claude and Anthropic. Claude has always been a fantastic product with arguably the best agentic models, but has struggled to make these advantages usable for the mainstream consumer. This feels like the first concentrated effort to change that." Greg Eisenberg says, "Send this to every normal person you know because normal people don't want to touch a terminal and this will make them 100x more powerful and productive at whatever it is they do." Indeed, speaking to how much more inviting this user interface is, Avthar shared a screenshot of the new Claude Cowork on his desktop saying, "Let's knock something off your list," with a highly action-oriented UI that suggests creating a file, crunching data, organizing files, making a prototype, prepping for the day, or sending a message. He wrote, "Even as a Claude Code diehard, I'm excited to play around with it more." So what have people been doing? Well, Kat Wu, who works on Claude Code at Anthropic, wrote, "I've been delegating a lot of my tasks to Cowork. Today, Cowork filed a workplace ticket for a coffee spill, prepped me for upcoming meetings, looked up Salesforce data via Chrome tool, and helped me buy a new down jacket." Lenny Rachitsky has been trying out a number of different use cases. In one, he said, "I asked it to go through every Lenny's podcast episode and pull out the 10 most important themes and lessons for product builders, then the 10 most counterintuitive truths. I gave it access to a folder with 320 transcripts. First, it said, this is a substantial task, 320 podcast transcripts to analyze. 15 minutes later, he had his list." So I think it's worth pausing and double-clicking on this. This is, of course, a type of use case that lots of people use existing tools for. In other words, taking the context of one set of content and turning it into other content. The difference here is, of course, the scale. Lenny's episodes are dense, they're long. 320 transcripts is going to be between 450 and 600 hours of content, if not more, which is not something that would have been easily possible with other types of tools. In many ways, a lot of the core and differentiating use cases can be summed up as stuff that needs access to local files on your computer. As Off-Menu's Hunter Hammonds wrote, "Irony is every productivity app pouring billions into mediocre AI implementations just for local-first files to become the chosen one." So what else worked well? Joseph on X writes, "Cowork is magical. Seeing the context and the artifacts on the right side feels unreal. I got a flight canceled for no reason and Claude is filling out all my claims." There are lots of compliments about the user experience. Paperclippers writes, "Just started testing it now, but I'm really liking the Claude Coworker UI so far. Really nice for doing research and quickly turning it into files for later reference." And yet, it didn't take long for people to remember that this was a research preview. Brian Lovin writes, "One of the featured workflows for Claude Cowork is to help you plan your day and week. This is the default experience. Feels like it didn't fully bake." And he shared a screenshot of Cowork just not quite being able to actually use the connectors, like Gmail, Google Calendar, and GitHub, even though technically they were connected. Mehul Mohan writes, "Just tried Claude Coworker and it's basically unusable for me. Claude Code did the work in 2 minutes. Coworker is stuck on the screen for multiple minutes." As Ed from Stripe pointed out, however, considering they said it was a research preview, I don't think anything should be considered fully baked. And indeed, the team behind it made that point clearly. Back to that post from Felix, he writes, "We're releasing Cowork early. It has rough edges, but figuring out what to build is increasingly the hardest part of software engineering, and we think getting feedback early and hearing what users actually need is how we build something truly good." Now, outside of just things breaking, there are some concerns that people have. Ben Hilak jokingly summed up, "Anthropic is constantly pushing the frontiers of giving an LLM root access to your computer." And indeed, the risks here were part of Anthropic's announcement. In their announcement post, they write, "In Cowork, you can choose which folders and connectors Claude can see. Claude can't read or edit anything you don't give it explicit access to. Claude will also ask before taking any significant action so you can steer or course correct it as you need. That said, there are still things to be aware of before you give Claude control. By default, the main thing to know is that Claude can take potentially destructive actions such as deleting local files if it's instructed to. Since there's always some chance that Claude might misinterpret your instructions, you should give Claude very clear guidance around things like this." Now, when folks went and looked how this was executed, some of their concerns were alleviated. Ben Hilak actually reposted himself and said, "Spoke too soon, it's running in a VM. To be clear, there are many, many risks, especially when you're talking about giving access to normies, but strictly speaking, safer than Claude Code." Simon Willison in his blog post about it said, Anthropic say that Cowork can only access files you granted access to. It looks to me like they're mounting those files into a containerized environment, which should mean we can trust Cowork not to be able to access anything outside of that sandbox. However, even with that, there is another concern. In a section called the ever-present threat of prompt injection, Simon writes, "With features like this, my first thought always jumps straight to security. How big is the risk that someone using this might be hit by hidden malicious instructions somewhere that break their computer or steal their data?" He points out that Anthropic actually discussed this in that announcement as well, writing, "You should be aware of the risk of prompt injections, attempts by attackers to alter Claude's plans through content it might encounter on the internet. We've built sophisticated defenses against prompt injections, but agent safety, that is the task of securing Claude's real-world actions, is still an active area of development in the industry. One of their suggestions to minimize risks is to, quote, monitor Claude for suspicious actions that may indicate prompt injection. But as Simon points out, I don't think it's fair to tell regular non-programmer users to watch out for suspicious actions that may indicate prompt injection." Now, ultimately, he concludes that Anthropic are being honest with their warnings and that they can, of course, provide total guarantees. One of the other concerns for some is the cost. Right now, Cowork is only available in research preview to people with Max accounts, which start at $100 a month. Nick Torres writes, "All right, Coworker looks amazing and extremely helpful. But how does a company of 150 plus actually implement it without immediately paying $100 to $150 a user out of the gate? How have others started training users on it?" Now, I think this is a totally reasonable concern, but I also think that the Max plan gating is very much about the rollout of this product rather than an ultimate intention. In other words, I think they needed to have a relatively small set of people be able to test it, and the Max plan subscription provides as good of a filter as any, especially considering that those are people who are going to be a little bit more adept with, or at least engaged with, Claude in general. One of the best summaries of Cowork overall came from Claire Vaux, the host of the How I AI podcast. She wrote an article on Twitter called "Who is Cowork for exactly?" She talks about what exactly it is, providing a slightly more technical look at all the different pieces of the system, and reaffirms that this is an action-oriented tool, saying every chat is now a task focused on doing a thing. She writes, "You ask Cowork to do a variety of tasks, and it takes a very Claude Code approach to executing your task. For her, she tried task 1, prep me for my day, which was one of the starter prompts in Cowork, and unfortunately had some issues." Claire writes, "I didn't have the Google Calendar connector set up at the time, but no big deal, right? There's a connector button right there. Unfortunately, Cowork couldn't recognize my Google Calendar connector once authed, and refreshed and restarted, and so it tried to use Claude Chrome plugin to open my browser and view my calendar. I banged my head against this problem a few times, but ultimately gave up on this task. Cowork seemed to know that it could call tools, but for some reason couldn't connect. Womp womp. Task 2 was to make a competitive research brief, and she said this one went a little bit better. She writes, after clarifying my needs, it made a basic plan to do some web research and use the docx skill to make a doc. It took probably 5 minutes to run the whole thing. Task 3 was to make a presentation from a document, which it did proficiently, although she thought that the UI suffered from showing her too much about what was going on in the background, or as she put it, how the sausage was made. Ultimately, she thought the UI was a nice upgrade, but a lot was broken. On the main question, though, of was this meaningfully better than just doing a straight chat, she said despite its flaws, it did create better outputs than straight chat. Still, she ended with an interesting question. Who is this for? And her answer was that she's not sure. Claire writes, "I can't imagine a Claude Max user on OS X who knows WTF to do with an agent and also would prefer a limited desktop app experience versus loading up the terminal. I understand that it's just in research preview right now, but the overlap between Claude Code and Cowork users right now is probably a circle. The challenge with this sort of thin wrapper on Claude Code UX is that it's not quite optimized for the non-technical and too kneecapped for the TUI pilled. Cowork right now sits in the fuzzy middle, and the team is going to need to optimize for one or the other to win over a new audience." I think this is a super on-point critique, and perhaps super to be expected for this stage of the release. I think Claire's right that they're going to have to lean even harder probably away from the Claude Code interface and into some real serious regular value use cases to attract people who aren't just going to upgrade to Claude Code right away anyways. For me myself, I do everything in the cloud, and so outside of this trying for my own personal interest, a lot of the use cases that people are getting value from don't super resonate right out of the gate, although certainly seeing the types of things that Lenny is doing with all of his transcripts could inspire some new activities. But I certainly think we're at the very beginning stages of figuring out exactly what this particular slice of the AI-assisted experience is useful for. Riley Brown referenced this, saying, "Not convinced the best agent tools for work will run locally on your desktop. I think they will run in virtual computers that you can share with your team." Now, here's really important context for all of this, though. As people give their reviews, they figure out what's broken, and they share where they think things need to go for this to find its right home with its expected audience. This product was built in the last week and a half. When Thursday AI's Alex Volkov wrote, "I wonder how much of this was Claude Code," Boris Cherny confirmed that basically all of it was written by Claude Code. In other words, this thing that we're excitedly talking about and having a bunch of ideas for what it could do in the future was a week-and-a-half long project entirely written by AI. As Tanay Jaipura put it, insane velocity. So what are the implications? First of all, whenever we get a new product from the big labs, everyone jumps to how many startups it kills right away. And Sean Wang, aka Swix, does point out that Anthropic took a different approach than many startups in a way that's currently looking pretty good. Swix writes, so many ambitious startups making the LLM OS tried all these fancy UXs and failed. So many ambitious startups making the AI browser tried to book your flights for you and failed. Meanwhile, Claude Code started unpretentiously as a CLI and can now run your browser and operate your system. Classic disruption theory. And yet, of course, Sean is not implying that that means that all those startups are dead. No, for that we have to leave it to other people. However, at this stage, this knee-jerk reaction has become so commonplace that actually the first thing we get isn't the people saying, look at how many startups it killed, but instead first explaining why it didn't kill all those startups. Connor Brennan Burke writes, lots of posts saying Claude Cowork just killed hundreds of startups. By the way, editor's note, I actually couldn't find any, which is why I'm saying that we've now shifted and this becomes the average response. But for the sake of the argument, we continue with Connor. They're wrong, and here's why. We've seen this narrative before. It makes a clean, simple story, but it's not how markets actually work. OpenAI Dev Day 2023, text-to-speech launch, people said it would kill 11 labs and similar startups. In reality, demand for voice exploded and the category expanded into more specialized tools. 11 labs is doing better than ever. ChatGPT Enterprise, people said it would kill B2B AI startups. Reality, it unlocked budgets, made AI procurement safe, and created demand for everything it didn't cover. Big labs ship a default experience. That gives massive free education and proves the behavior actually works. Users try the flagship, then immediately ask for more. Vertical focus, deployment control, privacy, multimodal, deeper integrations. My prediction, 10x more workplace agent startups next year because of Claude Cowork. So at least for now, we have a bet that the startups aren't going to at least immediately die, and in fact, even some who think that this leads to an expansion. Now, another implication of this is around the productization phase of AI. Austin Allred represented lots of people when he tweeted, I'm a little confused at the hype around this. Isn't this exactly what Claude does already and has done for a long time? Is this just marketing to let non-technical people know they can use it too? I must be missing something. And the point, of course, is that he's not exactly, but UI shifts aren't just UI shifts if they open up entirely new categories of use cases for entire new sets of users because they wouldn't interact with the previous UI for some perceived or real technical barrier. Robin Farage writes, finally, Claude Cowork is out and it's basically nothing new. I've been using Claude Code for anything on my file system for a while now, but Claude Code makes this more user-friendly now and more accessible to the broad. Simon Willison included an entire section in his post called, Isn't This Just Claude Code? And the answer is basically, yeah, but, as Simon writes, Claude Code has an enormous amount of value that hasn't yet been unlocked for a general audience, and this seems like a pragmatic approach. Prinz writes, as to Claude Cowork, I personally am very excited about its ability to search my local files, which seems to come with a nice UI. Yes, I know that Claude Code can do that too, but the percentage of lawyers who will be comfortable with using a command line interface is probably less than 1%. And so, nice UI is critical. Nice UIs will eventually win over us non-technical people. Now, another implication that follows from all this is a continuation of the pattern that we've been talking about a lot as we transition from 25 to 26, where a lot of 26 for non-technical folks is going to be speed running through a process that developers went through last year. Lean Zabretsky writes, welcome the non-developers to using Claude Code as your coworker. We've been doing it since the beginning of December. Feels so distant now. Nicholas Cole writes, whenever I see stuff like this, I think about when my wife worked at this huge nonprofit and their training instructions for how to use the internet included, make sure both feet are planted firmly on the ground, sit upright in your desk chair to not hurt your back, hold the mouse tight with your hand, don't let it fall. Anyone on this side of the internet thinks we're living in the future, and we are. But everybody else is still in the Stone Age. Most companies don't have a single no-code Zapier automation running, and most everyday consumers don't know how to set up a basic filter inside Gmail. All of this new tech is super exciting. But don't forget 99.9% of companies and people still need help solving way simpler problems. Claire Vaux, again, I think takes this in an important direction when she writes effectively that UI, as much as it is a part of this, isn't enough. That this is in fact an entire product design process, which is why productization is so important. Claire writes, the problem with AI products for normies is that too many technical people have seen the AGI god and think everyone will want this, and it must be a UI issue. But guess what? No, they don't, and no, it isn't. We shouldn't be asking how to make agents more accessible or the terminal less scary. If you want to increase the TAM of an AI product, you need to either A, discover existing pain points, or B, inspire the art of the possible. Remember, existing pain points have to be real. Not just better, but OMFG, how would I do it any other way? This looks like I have to do this for work and you've made it 10x faster and less painful. My computer is slow and broken and now it works. I've been working around this thing for ages and you made it go away. I'm too tired or busy to learn this and you taught it to me in 2 minutes. Once you find these problems, don't give users a general platform. Give them a button to a golden path. Your mom is not going to spontaneously vibe code a family photo sharing app. Your uncle is not going to reach for a coding agent to debug the washing machine. Your kids aren't allowed to write with AI at school. You need to hit users over and over and over with good ideas and use cases, plus your brand, so when they finally have a novel problem, you're top of mind as a solution. 99% of people do not want agents or models or primitives or skills or artifacts or file access or tools or connectors or MCPs or APIs. They want to not get fired, save time, make money, not be annoyed, entertain themselves, express themselves, and feel good. Start there, then build UI. Now, another interesting implication is around the competition between the labs. This isn't something I'm seeing a ton of discussion on, but I think Ethan Malik made a really salient point when he wrote, Claude's gaps in image creation and voice became less important when Claude Code just uses APIs to go to Nano Banana or ChatGPT image gen whenever it needs a picture made, or 11 Labs API whenever it needs a voice. The anonymous I Rule the World account responded, who'd have thought just making the AGI would be the thing to do? Now, even if we are in early days when it comes to shifting a new set of consumers onto these types of tools, I think people do have a sense that we're opening up a new era for normal non-technical users. As Dan Schipper did async AI for the rest of us, or as John McBurney intimated, the Jarvis area for the broad public. Referencing a post from Dan Schipper, John writes, Claude Code in a trench coat I think perfectly describes the most interesting opportunity that I felt in the last 6 months. Claude Code represents a paradigm shift, a move towards a personal AI assistant like Jarvis from Iron Man. And the packaging of AI and tools in this way is a key product insight that I think will define the next big thing. Now, some are betting that all the other labs are going to have to follow suit. Lord of a Few writes, this is a moment in time. OpenAI will be close behind, followed by Google. Microsoft will do something similar and distribute to billions instantaneously. Apple will incorporate a similar technique. And like that, the entire world economy will shift over 12 months. The promise of what has been told to you for the past 3 years is here. And it's this ergonomics. Agents on your Mac and PC, operating on files like how you work. What a time to be alive. Stop scrolling and start building the future. By the way, when it comes to building, one of my strongest arguments is that something pretty fundamental has shifted over the last few months. I talked about it a few times on this show, where all the developers and super enfranchised AI users went back over the holiday, actually took the time to vibe code a bunch of side projects, and realized that AI and agentic coding had gotten so good that they could do way more than they thought was possible before. Now, even though there are still some holdouts right now, many holdouts in fact, who still try to draw a thick line between vibe coding things that you can use for not production and prototypes and non-vibe coded things that are ready for production, I am firmly in the camp that that line is basically already gone, and if not, is going to explode in the next several months. Didi Das of Menlo Ventures seems to agree. After Boris shared that all of this had been written by Claude Code, Didi writes, today was proof that fully polished new product can be built entirely with vibe coding tools like Claude Code. Many people, especially in big tech, who still don't believe it. You haven't tried the latest models. You don't have the right setup. Your code base is still too large. Your code style is not well represented in the training data. All 4 of these are entirely self-imposed problems. You will be outrun on product velocity if you aren't adopting these tools. This is something that I'm going to explore in much more depth in and around this show throughout this year, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And in the meantime, if you do happen to have a Max account, go check out Claude Cowork. Once you do, if you have ideas for how to make it work, share them with the team. One thing Anthropic is doing really well right now, and in fact, I think you have to give credit to all the major labs for, is they are all floating all around X all the time, actively engaging with and listening to the suggestions of users. Felix Riesberg of Anthropic even requests to be tagged in that feedback, saying we want to iterate very quickly and make it a little bit better every day. Ultimately, for all of its faults and challenges, I think this is a huge step forward. Goodness knows if you're listening to this show, you probably have felt like people have been beating you over the head with how good Claude Code is for months now. And with Cowork, there is increasingly going to be a UI for everybody who's not a developer to try to get all those benefits. I will certainly continue to be trying it out and sharing it as I figure use cases out. For now, though, that's going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Appreciate you listening as always, and until next time, peace